This is one of a series of Good Answers presentations, offering evidence to answer skeptical challenges to the Bible's accuracy. Many Christians, myself included, take the assertion that the Bible is a revelation from God quite seriously. That is, we conclude that since God is perfect and incapable of error, any revelation he gives us will also be error-free. Other Christians might argue that this view is too rigid. As they see it, the Bible is a spiritual revelation, and so it tells us of God's love and his justice, of man's destiny, and so forth. But it is too much to expect that it would be a reliable textbook for history or science. These are matters for humans to explore and evaluate. And after all, they say, science has shown us so much in recent centuries, things that could never have been understood by believers in antiquity. Such a view of Scripture is, I would argue, comforting on the surface, but ultimately dangerous to faith. It says we are to assume potential conflict between Bible and science, and that when we see an apparent contradiction, we are to look uncritically at science and skeptically at the Bible. It becomes expected at the outset that any disagreement will go to the Bible's disadvantage. When one assumes that the Bible contains errors of historical or scientific fact, that assumption can eat away at confidence in its reliability as a whole, and then faith comes into jeopardy. Here's an example. This is a highly talented and successful novelist. Each of his books has appeared on the New York Times bestseller list, and at least 3 have been made into wildly popular feature films. One assumes he is rich as a result. Some time back, he was being interviewed for a magazine and was asked, "Are you religious?" Here was his answer: "I was raised Episcopalian, and I was very religious as a kid. Then, in 8th or 9th grade, I studied astronomy, cosmology, and the origins of the universe. I remember saying to a minister, 'I don't get it. I read a book that said there was an explosion known as the Big Bang, but here it says God created heaven and earth and the animals in 7 days. Which is right?' A somewhat prickly question, right? The response I got was, 'Nice boys don't ask that question.' A light went off, and I said, 'The Bible doesn't make sense. Science makes much more sense to me.' And I just gravitated away from religion." He did indeed turn from religion, and actually became hostile to Christianity in particular. His name is Dan Brown, and if you have read his The Da Vinci Code, you have seen how he distorts the Christian faith. In his book, Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. The early disciples misrepresented his nature and suppressed some of what he taught. And all of Christian faith, then, is based on lies. What happened to Dan Brown? He asked a genuine question about the Bible. Now, the priest might not have had a good answer to that question. That's not the point. The crucial point is the boy had the right to be treated seriously and not just blown off. But he was. Nice boys don't ask that question. And that day, Dan Brown died. Spiritually, he died. That is tragedy enough, but it didn't end there. Nobody knew that the teenage Dan Brown would one day be an immensely successful novelist, and that his works might undermine the faith of countless readers. And why? Because one Christian mentor refused to take his question seriously. There are good questions like this that sincere believers may ask, and they deserve at least serious and thoughtful responses. Today, we'll look at one of them. Genesis and the account of creation, day 4. Then God said, "Let great lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them mark off the seasons, days, and years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth." And that is what happened. God made 2 great lights, the sun and the moon, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Genesis 1, 14-18. There's the Bible account. Now, let's do a little science. As we all learned in around the 8th grade, light travels at 186,000 miles per second. The teacher would have shown us an example rather like this. The distance from the sun to our Earth is 93 million miles. How long then does it take the sun's light to reach us? Simple math, huh? 93 million divided by 186,000 gives us 500 seconds. Divide by 60, and our result is a little under 8.5 minutes. So then, when we step outside and glance upward, we see the sun. But we actually are seeing it as it was 8.5 minutes ago. Maybe it's no longer there. For any stars other than our sun, it gets worse. We have to deal with really great distances and light years. Here's a dictionary definition. The distance that light travels in a vacuum in 1 year, approximately 9.46 trillion kilometers, or 5.88 trillion miles. And another example. Our nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is 25,284 billion miles away. If we did the math there, we'd see that its light would take 4.3 years to reach us. Now let's go back to Genesis and creation. Day 6 this time. Adam and Eve, newly made on that day, are witnessing their first sunset. Then what will they see? The last light fades. It's night, the beginning of day 7 in Jewish reckoning, and a crescent moon hangs in the sky, surrounded by an endless carpet of stars. But wait! It's only been 3 days since the heavenly bodies were made. The star's light hasn't had time to reach Earth yet. The sky must look empty, dead black, but for the moon. When will our parent couple see the stars? Well, after 4.3 years, they will at least see one. Alpha Centauri will be there. As for the others, they'll make an appearance one at a time over years, centuries, millennia, depending on how many light years away they are. It would take hundreds of millions of years for the sky to fill with stars as our sky is now. But Genesis says that stars were created to light the earth. Does this make sense? We have bumped into what many call the light from distant stars problem. Has their light been on its way for hundreds of millions of years? The speed of light, as we know it, would say yes. But the Bible, would God make the earth wait so long to enjoy the beauty and the aid of the stars he had made? Surely not. But could the textbooks be wrong? Well, let's see. How were they able to measure the speed of light in the first place? Here's a simplified version, but the principle is accurate. Take a light source, a mirror, and a timer set to 0. Turn on the light. It travels to the mirror, reflects back, and we check its arrival time. Let's say it's a long way to the mirror, and the timer shows 2 seconds. So it took 2 seconds to go the distance from the light source to the mirror and back. Simple. But that's the round trip time. What would the one-way time have been? Half that, right? That's what we would assume. But how do we know? Maybe there's a difference in light speed going in one direction and in another. Maybe it took 2 seconds to go to the mirror and no time at all to return. To be sure, we have to measure the one-way speed. Here's one way to do that. We use 2 clocks synchronized to each other. Then we turn on the light. One clock shows when we turned it on, and the other shows when the light got there. Oh, but wait. How do we synchronize the clocks? Easy. We can do it with a radio signal. Okay, let's set up that signal. But how fast do radio waves travel? About as fast as light, they say. So we will get a number on that second clock, but we won't be able to trust it. That method didn't work. Maybe we can get around that, though. Let's synchronize the clocks first, and then move one. There. Then when we turn on the light, we can get a reading at each end and nail the problem. That procedure might have worked had it not been for Dr. Einstein's insight. He pointed out that motion distorts time. His assertion was only a theory for some years, but then we were able to test it. We put 2 synchronized atomic clocks, one at a fixed point on Earth and one in a jet plane. When checked after the flight, they were no longer synchronized, and the professor's theory was a fact. Because then of the interaction of time and motion, our idea to synchronize the clocks and then move one won't work for us either. In fact, to their frustration, scientists have concluded that no method for measuring the one-way speed of light will work. Here's Dr. Einstein's definitive statement on the issue. The one-way speed of light is in reality neither a supposition nor a hypothesis about the physical nature of light, but a stipulation which I can make of my own free will in order to arrive at a definition of simultaneity. That's Einstein in Relativity, the Special and General Theory, pages 22 and 23. But the one-way speed of light is not a fact or even a hypothesis. It is a pure stipulation. But we'd really like to know the absolute speed of light. So, since its round-trip speed can be measured, let's just assume that we can take half that number and say that that is its regular travel time in any direction, in any situation. Okay, but underneath that bland assumption is a nasty little fact, known to every physicist since Einstein. It is impossible to measure the one-way speed of light. Therefore, we cannot know how long it takes for the light from stars to reach us. That time could be anything, including 0. You may have trouble absorbing an idea that seems so counterintuitive. I was, until I came across an article by an astrophysicist, Dr. Jason Lisle. He explained the matter in this way, quote, "Those unfamiliar with relativistic physics are deeply inclined to believe in absolute time and space, and therefore it will seem strongly intuitive to them that the one-way speed of light should be an objective, invariant, and measurable quantity. But the universe is not constructed that way. Our inability to measure the one-way speed of light is not due to a lack of creativity on our part in designing some experiment to do it. Rather, it is due to the way God has constructed space-time." End quote. That's Jason Lisle, a PhD astrophysicist in Anisotropic Synchrony Convention, a solution to the distant starlight problem, in Answers Research Journal, pages 191 to 207. An analogy may help here to clarify the idea of a convention, or as Einstein called it, a stipulation. Here's a computer chip. How long is it? Well, it's just over 5 centimeters in Europe, but 2 inches in America. That doesn't bother us, does it? The centimeter scale and the English scale are just 2 arbitrary ways of measuring something. We may choose one or the other at our convenience. Neither one can be proven right or wrong. But since we like to measure things, we do choose one or the other. What Einstein and Lisle are saying is that the one-way speed of light is like that. Einstein chose the so-called isotropic scale, in which light travels the same speed in any direction, as the Europeans chose the metric scale. Other physicists can choose the so-called anisotropic scale, in which light's speed varies by direction, as we Americans chose the English scale. It is no more possible to prove one of these right and the other wrong than it is to prove the metric scale right and the English wrong. Let's go back to Dr. Lisle with that in mind. Quote, "Einstein tells us that we may freely choose which convention to use. For the sake of simplicity, most physicists choose to regard light as moving at the same speed in all directions, that is, isotropic. However, there is no fundamental reason that we cannot use ASC That's the anisotropic synchrony convention. Instead, it appears that the biblical writers used the ASC convention. Genesis 1:15 tells us that the lights in the heavens were designed to give light upon the earth. And it also tells us, and it was so. This strongly suggests that the stars immediately began fulfilling their God-ordained purpose to give light upon the earth. End quote. That's Dr. Lyle. Distant Starlight, the Anisotropic Synchrony Convention. One may wonder why the Bible used what is called the Anisotropic Synchrony Convention rather than the isotropic. Well, given the use of that convention, all peoples in all times can look up at the stars and see that they are indeed giving light on the earth, as the Bible says. In that context, it accords with what we actually see and with what the Bible actually suggests. I think that now we can return to creation, day 4, perhaps with emphasis added. Then God said, "Let great lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them mark off the seasons, days, and years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth." And that is what happened. God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And then, as the sunset of the 6th day became twilight, and the twilight became night, that first couple, looking at the sky, saw the expanse sprinkled with countless points of light, just as God had ordered. If you have questions about this lecture, or any of the others in the Good Answers series, you may address them to me, Dr. Jerry C. 4 at yahoo.com.